All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Jess Ross, and I am the Interim Executive Director for Austin Freenet. Thank you all for attending our first of two panels for Digital Inclusion Week. I am beyond excited for this discussion, but before we begin, please allow me to introduce our admin and our moderator for this event. I am obviously biased when I say we have the best volunteers at Austin Freenet. Cole and Rachel are no exception. Rachel Frock currently works at as a senior software engineer with Aunt Bertha, an Austin-based certified B corporation. She serves as a mentor for the Bridging Disciplines program and the Women in Computer Science program at the University of Texas. She's also had a huge hand in helping Austin Freenet launch its new website, which is now live, so go check it out when you have a chance. Rachel will be our admin this afternoon. You'll see her assisting in the chat. Please feel free to engage her if you have any questions during our discussion. And thank you, Rachel, for your help today. When Cole is not volunteering with Austin Freenet, he works in the world of nonpartisan civic education at the Annette Strauss Institute. He served as a legislative director in the Texas State Capitol in youth-centric advocacy on political campaigns and as an educator in New York City. He's a member of the Austin Monitors Advisory Board, a member of Leadership Austin Emerge Class of 2020, and a member of the Austin Young Chamber. If that wasn't enough, he was up until midnight last night helping community members register to vote before the deadline. And I believe he got over 700 people registered to vote last night, which is phenomenal. We are beyond grateful for his contributions to Austin Freenet and the community. And without further ado, ladies, gentlemen, and everyone in between, our moderator for the event, Cole Wilson. Take it away, Cole.
That was so sweet, Jess. Thank you so much. I can't take credit for those registrations. Those are the students I work with. But thank you for that. Thank you so much. It is my honor to introduce the four panelists we have today. I can't say enough how excited I am about this panel, and I hope y'all are as well. Joining us today is Justin Brady-Joyner. He's joining us from NI, formerly National Instruments. He's been with NI for the past 4 years, spending the last 2 building out the company's first global diversity, equity, and inclusion function. Justin is super passionate about education, having spent the first 12 years of his career in colleges and universities focusing on leadership development of students, faculty, and staff. We also have John Michael Cortez joining us from Google Fiber. John Michael Cortez serves as Google Fiber's Government and Community Affairs Manager here in Austin. He previously served as Special Assistant to the Mayor, where he advised Mayor Adler on some of the most challenging issues facing our city, including regional and urban planning, transportation, workforce development, and affordable housing. He served on advisory councils all across the city, so many, too many to name. Those include the Austin Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, UT's Division of Diversity and Community Engagement. He's on the board of directors at Every Texan and so many more. We also have Denny Lucio joining us. He is the Community Impact Manager for Google Fiber. He spent the majority of his time at Google here in Austin and recently relocated to Seattle. In the past, back in 2020, Daniel served as the board chair of ECHO. ECHO is an organization dedicated to ending homelessness here in Austin. Danny told me to keep that one short so I could go on and on about his work and accolades, but I'm going to leave it there and then wrap up with Parisa Fatehi-Weeks, who serves as the Senior Director for Global Community Impact at Indeed. She's also the board president for the Workers' Defense Project, an immigrant workers' rights organization here in Austin that does way more than just that. She most recently led Digital Inclusion Portfolio at Google, the Digital Inclusion Portfolio at Google. Bruce was born in Iran and grew up here in Austin. She serves as staff attorney at Public Advocates, a nonprofit civil rights law firm in San Francisco, as a law clerk to the U.S. District Court Judge, Judge Vanessa D. Gilmore, forgive me, and worked at the U.S. EPA in Washington, D.C. Normally, we pause for a big round of applause, and y'all would get the praise you deserve for all of y'all's hard work, but we're still in Zoom. So I'll just hop awkwardly right into questions. I want to say that if anybody in the audience has a question, throw it in the chat. All of our panelists have so graciously agreed to take them at the end of the conversation today. So we'll start calling on y'all as you ask your questions in the chat towards the end of the conversation. With that, I'll jumpstart the conversation by asking our panelists each to tell us about the ways that your organization is working to bridge the digital divide. There are countless ways to ease the digital divide, from promoting digital literacy to supplying critical infrastructure. What ways has your company chosen to bridge the digital divide, and why? And we can start in the order that we were introduced. So Justin, if you want to start us off, that'd be great.
Sure. And thanks again for having me. I'm super excited as well to share a little bit about what we've been doing at NI, and also to learn from the others on the call about the great things that you're doing at your organizations as well. Like you said, I've been at NI for about 4 years, and so I've gotten to see some of the different ways that we've interacted and engaged with the community. But the concept of digital equity, I think I've started to understand it more through the lens of the nonprofits that we're working with and connecting with. So we're really addressing digital equity through our corporate impact strategy, and it's through those partnerships with strategic nonprofits that are deeply entrenched in the community and really aware of the best ways to address the needs. Some of that is we've had longstanding partnerships with groups like Breakthrough Central Texas, groups like First, some newer partnerships as we've refined our impact strategy with groups like Code to College and Autumn, Austin Urban Technology Movement. But really it's through what we can do to uplift these nonprofits, to connect them also with others, to collaborate together on addressing different elements of digital equity together too. So it feels like with our focus predominantly in education and STEM education, that the piece that we hone in on more is digital literacy. But I would say the way we speak about it often is more related to STEM education. So.
Do you want me to jump in next, Cole?
Yeah, please.
Well, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and look forward to the conversation, and look forward to Daniel jumping in and correcting me, and Parisa correcting me on anything I say it's incorrect. But yeah, I'm fairly new to fiber, but I know enough now to make me dangerous. But you know, fiber's mission is very appealing to me. Just given some of the things that I've done prior. You know, it's an organization that really believes that everybody should have access to fast, reliable, fair internet access. And so, you know, we're all about that, and we're more on the access to the home side of things. You know, we believe that a fiber connection to the home, symmetrical fiber connection to the home, is really important. You know, we have a lot of investment happening in wireless internet access, and that's great. We need that. Let's keep doing that. But we think that getting fiber to everyone's home as much if we can is really key for the future, because it's future-proof. It provides the measure of bandwidth that's necessary now and into the future for all the ways that we're interfacing, and as many of us have had to unfortunately learn over the last year and a half, you know, we're having to engage with the internet in lots of different ways, and fiber is really the technology that will enable us to do that. So you know, fiber is in the markets that we serve, is really trying to lead the market into providing that measure of equitable access, and I think we're doing a fairly good job in the markets of what we serve. You know, the only problem is that we got started in this business a little late, and it takes a while. But we are expanding our network here in Austin and San Antonio and other major cities around the country as fast as we ever have, and look forward to more years of providing access to come. Beyond that, we also make some pretty targeted investments in STEM as well in the past, but also directly into efforts that are advancing the ball in digital equity and inclusion. Austin Freenet's been a longtime partner of ours, along with N10 and many others, Libraries Without Borders, on a national level. So we're doing as much as we can, but you know, glad that everybody else is pitching in as well, because it's critically important.
I think you got most of that covered. I think if folks want to talk about some of the nuts and bolts of the things that we're doing in there, happy to like answer those questions when we get there. I do want to highlight that I think digital equity is something that is multi-layered, and so Google Fiber's approach has been multi-layered in the years that we've been investing in places like Austin. So that looks like everything from coming up with like low costs or free service for folks in public housing, to partnering with organizations that really, like Austin Freenet, that understand other components of digital equity, like digital literacy or device access and things like that. So we've got a pretty expansive, multi-layered approach, I would say, to digital equity, and happy to talk about that more, but want to leave room for other folks here.
Yeah, so I guess speaking from the perspective of being an Indeedian now, I was previously at Google. I would say we're a little bit more focused on digital skills as they apply to finding jobs. So Indeed's mission, of course, is to help all people get jobs. And in particular, the part of the organization that I'm in, the environmental social governance team, we're really thinking about how do we help job seekers who face barriers get hired, and assuming that everyone knows how to use online resources like Indeed assumes a lot of digital literacy. And so our primary focus up until now, and especially over the past couple of years, has been equipping community partners like Goodwill with very easy to use resources so that job seekers who haven't had the opportunity to develop the skills on how to use Indeed or the internet at all can actually do so. I do think, and I'm excited to be a part of this discussion, that Indeed has a lot to learn about how to plug into a lot of the community-based efforts around digital equity. And I think we'll only continue to grow into it. So folks on this call are actually the kinds of folks I think we'll be working with more and more.
That's awesome. That's amazing. And I hope we can, we'll take credit for that after the next big press release. Y'all make sure to mention us in this event. It's also wonderful to hear the same words coming up, right? Partnerships, collaboration, but also the services y'all are offering are center. I mean, that's the nucleus of these partnerships that I'm hearing. That's incredible. That's what big tech's doing, right? They bridge the digital divide. But y'all are being modest. I know. I did my research. Y'all are doing some amazing things. And Danny, you touched on it, the nuts and bolts. So with that, I want to ask, and I'll start with you again, Justin, a specific question about those nuts and bolts and about the role that NI is playing. And you touched on it a bit in your last answer to my question. Y'all just announced at NI a huge $400,000 initiative with Autumn here in Austin, and another major scholarship initiative with ACC last month, the NI Technical Scholar Program and the NI Engineering Opportunity Scholarship, respectively. Like so many NI initiatives in this space, these are super education focused. We're talking about partnerships and working collaboratively. Why is NI working in STEM education? Why is education the conduit that NI is using to make this impact?
Sure. Great question. And I love that you've called out to these two pieces that we're very excited about: the partnership with Autumn, partnership with ACC. Really, we, over the last couple of years, started to go through a company rebrand to look at our core values and reevaluate them and ensure that they still fit who we are. And that gave us even more guidance and direction around our impact strategy and our focus, and gave us more impetus and desire to deepen our focus in our community engagement, both here as well as at sites around the globe too. The focus on STEM education is in part because it aligns with one of our 3 pillars that we have with our impact strategy. So the strategy is broken up to changing the faces of engineering. So that's really diversifying STEM. It's building an equitable and thriving society, and then engineering a healthy planet. And so many of our, or the 2 that you mentioned, really align directly with that, changing the faces of engineering pillar that we have, that diversifying STEM piece. The way we look at this is we recognize that there's gaps in the way that we see people even fulfilling roles in STEM across different tech environments. And so that is an NI problem, but it's also a bigger problem that we need to address holistically. So by diving into STEM education and improving access in areas that we have the opportunity to, partnering with nonprofits that look at K through 12 and then also look at adult education. You know, Autumn is really focused on upskilling and reskilling adults that might pivot into tech for the first time as well. Ideally, that's something that's going to uplift all of our organizations and all of the community, and not just focused only on NI. But it does focus on that pillar that drives towards something that's mapping towards our core values too, that we see in that. The point here that I see where it's connecting with digital equity is really in that area of digital literacy, like I mentioned before. It's really focused on providing access and opportunity here, where we have the opportunity to partner with a nonprofit that gets some of the needs and some of the issues that exist. I think we're not necessarily experts in digital equity ourselves, but we know some of these nonprofits are engaged in areas where they know kind of what's needed. And so our goal is, how do we help them collaborate with others too, that are addressing and tackling the issues from multiple perspectives. Is that helpful? Did that answer the question?
That certainly did. Yeah, thank you so much. And
Yeah, sure.
I think it's also, I appreciate the ability for you to say, like, we're not the experts in this. I think that's a human trait to not want to say that. I know I hate saying it sometimes.
Yeah.
But I'm going to give a question to John Michael and Danny, who are the experts in providing direct services. So since 2014, Google Fiber, y'all been pushing the Unlocking the Connection initiative in partnership with the Austin Housing Authority. I've been providing residents across the city with Google Fiber, amazing high-speed internet, the direct service y'all provide at no cost to the users, I should say. Initiative as well. And there's so many other moving parts within this goal. Y'all touched on that earlier. Can you discuss why the Unlocking the Connection initiative is so layered? And also talk to us about how Google Fiber as a service provider fits into that layered approach.
Well, I'll take the initial stab and then ask Danny to fill in. Well, you know, providing that service is you know, an important commitment that Fiber made at the very beginning and very inception of its partnership with the city of Austin. And you know, I think it's important that it not just be about the connection, because you know, getting a fiber jack in every public housing unit in the city, while great, doesn't really mean much if those residents you know have the digital literacy to know how to avail themselves of that opportunity. Doesn't mean much if they don't have devices that can utilize that internet connection. It doesn't really mean much if they don't know how they can actually use the internet to access opportunity and improve their lives. So it can't just be about getting a fiber jack in every unit. It has to include all of those other facets of knowing how to participate in our digital world and in our economy these days. So you know, we've partnered with other organizations to ensure, because we're not necessarily you know, the best provider for those services or the experts in those particular arenas. So we've long partnered with other organizations and institutions to help bridge that gap, so that the investment that we're making in those residents and with HACA can be utilized to the fullest extent. Danny, what did I miss?
I think that's right. You know, I think probably the only things I can add are we also look to community institutions that are experts in direct service to help us solve some of those problems. So, you know, at the beginning of the outset of our Unlocking the Connection program, you know, we leveraged HACA as a partner because we were looking to reach public housing residents, and they were amazing to work with. We worked with Austin Freenet because there was a training and a digital literacy needs component there, and that was something that you know, we were able to leverage from Austin Freenet. And then there were devices, you know, which is something that I think while the pandemic has been has driven kind of the demand for a lot of this stuff at home. Devices is still one that we've not quite figured out like how to do well at scale, I think, in the region. You know, when we worked with the city of Austin to do refurbishing projects and organizations like PCs for People to identify devices, just so folks can have things like laptops or PCs to work on at home. But that's still something that I don't think, you know, we fully have figured out yet. And we do rely on community partners and local partners to figure out some of those pieces, and have thankfully have had some great ones in Austin with that. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you both for unpacking that, and also Danny for touching on, you know, the limitations as well. Parisa, you're not getting off easy. I've got one for you too, regarding something you already touched on, your partnership with Goodwill. In 2019, indeed, y'all launched Social Impact Initiative, working to help overlooked job seekers find work in and around the U.S., I believe, with Goodwill being one of y'all's major partners. You touched on this a little earlier. Can you tell us about that initiative and how it's impacted Austin specifically, especially in the wake of this last tumultuous year?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're right. So in 2019, in earnest is kind of when Indeed did launch some of its social impact efforts, with Goodwill being that anchor partner. And in fact, we sort of have what we call Indeed Fellows, like 12 locations across the US, Goodwill, where we go the deepest in our partnership. In Central Texas in particular, as the pandemic was taking hold, we did see that need for devices, just to draw on what was just said. So we did donations to create a mobile library for job seekers who didn't have computer access as they were going to Goodwill for help. We have seen, it's been very interesting to watch how differently the strengths of the different Goodwill locations have played out across the country. We are lucky that in Central Texas, we have a very capable partner in Goodwill of Central Texas. And really, we've plugged in there to help provide a lot of custom resources to job seekers, whether it's resume reviews, making things accessible for remote learning when Goodwill high school students could no longer come in person. We were able to partner with, you know, our core business to host a virtual hiring tour that involved thousands of employers. And actually in Central Texas and Dallas alone, those two Goodwill location partnerships, we helped 20,000 folks get hired in I guess it was last September, October, were those virtual hiring events. So what we've been able to do is connect a lot of people, but we still have so much to learn. And I would just signal that ahead, not only will we continue the partnerships approach, we'll continue to dig into actually creating our platform and modifying our platform in a way that makes it easiest for the job seekers who have the most barriers to connect to good quality jobs. I think that's going to be at scale the way we're able to touch the most folks.
That's incredible. 20,000 jobs in the middle of a global pandemic. That's no small feat, and y'all are still working to get the formula just right. That's impressive, guys. Justin, I'm gonna hop back to you. We're just gonna keep the cycle going. This is great. So y'all aren't new to the city of Austin. There's a placement article I was reading before this panel. The quote I drew from it: many of today's tech industry giants were still in their infancy when the NI was founded back in 1976. I don't think there was the idea of Google. I don't think Indeed was on the minds of too many folks back in 76.
It was called a card catalog, Cole. That's what
it say again, John Michael?
It was called a card catalog at the time. You know,
oh yeah, that was the Google. Yeah, or dictionary. Yeah. What has NI been doing in Austin for those last 40 years, Justin? And how has NI worked in the community for that span of time? I mean, Austin's changed a lot. Have you all been working with that ebb and flow of the city?
Sure. Yeah, it's something that I absolutely love about NI is how deeply embedded and long-term we've been in Austin. And that's just been a piece that's been exciting to join the company when I did about 4 years ago. One of the things that really drew me to the company was the fact that we were involved in the community in different ways, and that it seemed more as a just fabric of who we were as a company. I feel like my part of what drew me was that piece of philanthropy being a fabric of who we were. But specifically, the thing that stood out to me the most was we had a deep partnership with an organization called FIRST. And FIRST is really centered around STEM education, focusing on bringing kids into robotics and exploring programming through robotics. And that piece, to me, it was neat to see that it wasn't just a money donation. It wasn't just that they were supporting the work that they do verbally, but also we were providing mentors in the local school systems where we've got different FIRST teams. So many of our employees and still continue to serve as mentors or coaches for these different FIRST teams. So it was exciting to see. We had product donation. We had elements of our software that was built into Lego's Mindstorm EV3 kits. That are a part of the first Lego League portion, as well as a product donation of, I think it's called a Robo Rio, but it's a piece of the robotics with our software included in it as well. So those product donations, the mentorship that happens with the teams itself, and then also the financial support that we provided too. That's been a longstanding part of our involvement, both with the Austin community and even more broadly across the US too. And then others, partnerships, Girl Start and Breakthrough Central Texas and whatnot. But really the last few years, I feel like we've started to pivot and to think about how do we hone in our focus even more deeply. So while we still have that relationship with FIRST, we decided to focus more of that relationship and the money that we provide for the organization towards their DEI initiatives specifically. So how do we make sure that our investments are also matching the investments that we're making internally at the company as well? In terms of the Austin community, I think part of it too, we wanted to look at, and I mentioned this before, but we wanted to look at how can we find nonprofits that are already collaborating with others, or how do we help them collaborate with others so that they're working side by side on an issue together and maybe tackling different elements of those issues together. And so we recently had an announcement related to the Boys and Girls Club and the Thinkery as well. So it's a great partnership there where they're kind of addressing different elements, but doing it collaboratively and together. So what are ways that we can kind of bring groups together that already have knowledge bases in different areas, as opposed to trying to reinvent the wheel over and over again, or work with individual groups that are not realizing how their work is actually parallel together. And then in terms of, a lot of what we've talked about has been our STEM focus, but I think some of it also has been just how we respond as a company. And we saw so many companies do this, which is wonderful, but how companies responded to COVID. We had a significant donation to the Altogether ATX Foundation, or fund rather, and I know many other organizations did that as well. So looking at what are the ways that we can respond in the moment to things that are happening and impacting our local community here.
A lot. Short answer, a whole lot.
Yeah.
That's amazing. That's
Thanks.
amazing.
It's been exciting. I was going to say thanks, or I said thanks, but thanks on behalf of all of NI, like so many wonderful people there that are helping drive decisions, which has been exciting to be a part of a group that I feel like our leadership is encouraging us all to really rally behind these together. So
that's awesome. Yeah, shout out to them. Thank you guys from everyone here in the Austin community. I want to build off that the work y'all are doing in STEM education and the FIRST initiative, and pass it over to John Michael and Danny and asked them to walk us through their community leaders program, which is something that's an admittedly self-serving question. It looks like such an incredible a program, and it's so near and dear to my heart. It's a student-focused program, right? Could y'all tell us why y'all chose students to be change makers, and tell us a little bit more about that program and the impact it's had so far?
Yeah, I think you're referring to the Community Leaders Program, which we've changed around kind of the focus and how that program works. But, we drove that program for a number of years in the Austin area. And just for background on this, for folks that may not be familiar, the Community Leaders Program was one in which we partnered with local universities to identify students who were interested in working on some sort of like civic challenge or a challenge that a nonprofit partner was facing. That could be a tech-focused challenge, like they needed to adopt a piece of technology or create a piece of technology, or something programmatic. But we worked with local nonprofits to basically scope out what projects the students were going to work on, and then provided them with mentorship throughout the year to be able to work on those projects, mentorship and guidance for that. And so it's a win-win for kind of all the parties involved. The nonprofits get help with different projects, the universities get a partnership with different organizations, the students get practical experience with different programs, and get some exposure to tech. And even though it wasn't originally created as kind of like a recruitment program, there were quite a few students who ended up like going to Google and working for different parts of Google, which was pretty cool to see, or long-term volunteering or working with the organizations that they had been doing those projects with. So that was actually pretty cool to kind of see develop. But yeah, the main way in which Google kind of works with college students to develop their careers through internship programs, and that's kind of like its main vehicle. We don't necessarily do Google Fiber specific internship programs, but I think interested students between their junior and senior years, that's kind of when we target to like look at those programs. And there's still quite a few projects that we're looking for partnerships on that are student focused. And I think we're continuing to see how those types of programs like community leader program can evolve over time. And yeah, so I think like those types of projects are always an ongoing conversation. It's interesting to see how they impact the community in a variety of ways. I think we're trying to figure out how we can keep projects like that going, not just with Google Fiber, but kind of with the wider Google community locally. So
I'm going to take a point of personal privilege and add a little bit to that, sort of why Google Fiber invested in Community Leaders Program, but other things like it. So the theory there is that actually, if you, and I speak because I had the privilege of working on this in the past before I was at Indeed. The theory there is that, one, like Danny said, you may end up helping someone in college or earlier in their career to then transition to finding a job in tech. But even if you don't, that work and the exposure and the opportunity to work side by side with households, residents, families impacted by the digital divide should actually stay with you in any of the work you do in the future. And it's a lens, hopefully, that you just don't shake. So I can speak from personal experience. Like after law school, I had the chance to do a fellowship where nonprofits who often don't get enough funding to hire the staff they need, this funding provided a chance for me to be a new attorney at a nonprofit that really needed more hands on deck. And I did that work. I worked side by side with communities really lacking affordable housing and access to public transit. And even though I'm obviously not practicing that kind of law today, it's clearly something that then stuck with me for all the subsequent chapters of my career. And so part of the reason that it's so important to get in with college programs, and even Google Fiber founding the Digital Inclusion Fellowship Program, through which we actually first met Danny, and then Danny worked at Austin Freenet through a Google Fiber Digital Inclusion Fellowship, and then came on the Google Fiber team. All of that is about playing the long game. And I know, Cole, you can speak to that just from the work you do with college students, but I think we've seen that play out very, very well.
Parisa, that was incredible. That was an unbelievable answer. Thank you guys for that cumulative walkthrough of I mean, I asked why you work with students, and y'all walked me through like Danny's career and the impact in the long game. Y'all are incredible. What a great group. Thank you guys. I have so many more questions, but we're starting to run out of time. So I wanted to transition over to our audience questions. And I'll start with Kelsey's, who asks, what issues do y'all have with scaling device donations? This can go out to anyone on the panel, whoever wants to jump on it. What are the main challenges in regards with regards to devices?
I can take a first stab at this. So I think part of the main thing, and this has been the case for years, is like inventory, right? Like I think people think about like, and rightfully I think came to Google and Google Fiber at the beginning of the pandemic and were like, hey, where are all the devices? How can we get a hold of these things? And we were kind of like, actually there's like a huge run on devices globally as people start to transition, and we didn't have a huge inventory of that, but the lack of availability of devices actually existed way before this in Austin. We didn't have a great mechanism on a conduit for how to get those devices in folks' hands. Since that time, I think the city has explored a couple of programs. They've run a couple of pilot programs that focus on refurbishing reclaimed devices from various places. And so taking those devices, be it from companies or parts of government, and retooling them and redistributing them to different projects and programs. We've seen that kind of be successful, and we've worked with both the city and PCs for People on some of those distributions. But really it comes down to that. I think it comes down to that availability of technology. I mean, even at the beginning of this thing, Google really didn't even have enough devices for its own employees at some point. And so it was really hard to kind of turn around and you know, get additional ones out to other folks. Now, since the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of that has changed. There's been some changes to the supply chain that have kind of helped bring some of that in. We have the best way that we've found in helping organizations that do some sort of direct service, particularly in digital inclusion, get devices has been through like direct financial support and putting them in touch also with hardware manufacturers as well. So we've kind of played that role and just said, hey, listen, like we can't provide them directly, but we can help you get a hold of them, and here's how, kind of thing. So that's a little bit like farther than the question that you asked, but just to kind of give you some perspective on kind of how we've seen it develop.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I can say, this isn't my space where I volunteer with AFN, but AFN played a role in that as well, turning over donated devices, refurbishing them, and getting those back out to AISD and ACC students. Shout out to John, who's on the call. Thank you for all your work, and Raphael as well, the whole AFN team. On to Dr. Lintz's question. I'll start with her first question. And again, whoever wants to hop on this, please go ahead. What grant making or re-grant making activities are you finding best advanced digital inclusion?
I can jump in a little. I think the city of Austin deserves a big shout out for establishing the GTOPS program. That stands for Grants for Technology Opportunities program. That is something that has been held up nationally, actually, as an example of a way that a city government can really demonstrate leadership for digital equity and build a landscape in its city of organizations who may not traditionally be in the business of digital inclusion, but whose services clearly require or could benefit from their clients having access to the internet. So GTOPS is an obvious one. Certainly the corporations that are represented on this call clearly have some opportunities for partnerships. So approaching one of us after the call, if there are big opportunities, is worthwhile. I can't speak for NI, but I don't think any of us have direct grant applications sort of online, but sometimes working just organically through understanding each other and over time finding a way to work together is a great way to do it. I'm also very hopeful that the much talked about infrastructure bill at the federal level will lead to many, many, many new dollars at the state and local levels. For the first time, there's been meaningful amount of resources dedicated in that bill for not just building the fiber or the broadband itself, but also for digital literacy and other digital inclusion support to organizations. So I'm hopeful. I've seen Texas and other states set up more offices of digital equity for the first time, and those should sort of start to open up more of the faucets, if you will, for resources this way.
Thank you, Parisa. And I want to let folks know we're running out of time. So I think we have time for probably one more question. And as much as Dr. Lentz, I would like to ask all of these questions. These are incredible. One of your students chimed in, and I have a soft spot for asking student questions. So I'll run with that one. Lily asks, in summation, has Google Fiber learned anything from your HACA partnerships, such as how access to fiber has improved users' experiences applying for jobs, accessing benefits, staying connected with family, etc., or any new digital divide barriers that they're facing now? These folks have high-speed internet that y'all can help them overcome.
It's a good question. We now have several years of kind of experience that we can go look back on and see what the impact has been. I think there's actually some research being undertaken now to answer those questions with partnership. And Parisa, I'll ask you to chime in on this one. I think I learned about it from you. There's work that's the Housing Authority is doing along with the university that's, I guess, funded in part, at least, by Google and Fiber to ask those very questions as to what has the impact, especially given what we've all been living through for the last year and a half, and the reliance upon the internet and technologies having become so much more profound. What has the impact been for those residents who have access versus those who have not? So those are questions I think we're all interested in knowing the answers to, which I hope will become clear. I think some of that field work is just about done or has been finished, and the data is being assessed right now. So I'm looking forward to it. So stay tuned. What did I, and Parisa, please tell me what I got wrong on that one.
You got it. I just put the name of the faculty who have been leading that research over the past several years to deliver some longitudinal research. And I think Catherine Crago at HACA at the Housing Authority is also a great resource on some of these long-term learnings.
What a great way to oh, Danny, go ahead. You're just unmuted.
I was just gonna say, I think there's also something to a lot of the individual stories that we've seen, success stories of residents taking advantage of this as well. There was one really great one a couple of years ago about a student who utilized that connection in her last couple of years of high school and graduated as a valedictorian and went to UT on a full scholarship. And is in the middle of that journey right now. And we just see that time and time again. I know me personally, as someone who got internet much later in life, like it was literally my senior year of high school, it enabled me to go to college and enabled my brothers to be able to pursue education to a higher degree. And I know what a difference that can make for folks. And I think there's something to being able to see that play out for hundreds of individual families in the Austin area. So while there is some research happening there, we've definitely seen some amazing stories of folks utilizing this connection.
That was a wonderful, wonderful note to end on, Danny. Thank you for that. And with that, I want to say thank you again to all of our panelists, everyone at AFN, to Jess, to Rachel, to John, to Raphael, and for everyone for coming out. If you enjoyed this, we're hosting another Lunch and Learn on Thursday. We'll have the Mayor Pro Tem stopping by. Dr. Sharon Strover from Moody School will be there, as well as some other folks that are going to share some awesome information about the similarities and differences between rural and urban Texas and the digital divide that those communities are working to overcome. On that note, thank you again, panelists. Thank y'all for coming out. And please enjoy the rest of your Tuesday. We'll see y'all around.
Thanks all.